and
Exactly.
personalization of things.
So, Sarah, I think we should get started and let people wander in if they, what do you think?
Yeah, that's fine with me. I didn't get any emails from anyone else saying they would or would not be here today. So, I mean, I think, yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's open the meeting. As all of you who are here know, this is an enormous subject I am finding. I have been reading things on the internet. I have been calling people, talking to different people, and it is an amazing subject. Many people are interested in it. Throughout New York State, there are several other affordable housing committees. Typically outside of the metropolitan areas, it appears to me that they're more regional than municipality focused. And I don't know if Matt agrees with me on that, but there's some of them were county, several counties joined together. So in the month that gone by, I've contacted the Ontario County Economic Development, Mac Manikowski, and he referred me to several other people, the Ontario County Administrator, Tom Harvey, the County Planner, Tim Davis at the Cooperative Extension, Ryan Wallace at the Solar Factory in Geneva, who is involved even outside of Geneva in affordable housing. And eventually he also agreed that perhaps agricultural involvement would be an asset to what we were doing. So when I was reading, I read this is really a complex subject, and it's dependent on the type of community we're working in. What's affordable in some communities is not affordable in other communities, as we well know. It's a big issue to address. And in my opinion, I don't know if Matt agrees, but it's partially dependent on the economic development effort within the area. For example, high-tech companies would have a different level of affordability for their employees than industrial line companies such as Pactiv have for their people. So bottom line, we need help to develop a focus, develop a roadmap, determine where we're going to go and what our final objective is. And that is being dumped in Matt's hands at this point. And he put together a presentation, and he also has the MRB proposal to present to us. So I'll turn it over to Matt.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate it. I've been fortunate, and I know there are a couple of people on this call who've done a lot of work on this in the past in your professional work, and so I appreciate being among peers who do this type of work and who clearly have a passion for it, and that's going to, I think, advance us just as far as anyone's experience is that everyone here is pretty passionate about this topic. So I'm going to just share a screen quickly as soon as Doug Finch enables screen sharing. I just got a couple of—
You're good. Go ahead.
Couple of slides. There we are. So let me get this up here. I'm slow moving. So at the last meeting we had, everyone was asking the right questions and making the right observations, I think. As Karen pointed out, it's an incredibly broad topic, and it would be very easy for us to kind of wander around in the forest, really just trying to hone in on segments of the market that we're passionate about, that we have interest in, that we see need for in Canandaigua. But it really is too broad for the 10 to 20 of us to tackle on the whole. So So the strategic framework that I've kind of put together that's really honestly up for discussion is for us to try to prioritize our focus. And maybe we'll get through a priority and say, all right, great, we did that, we made some recommendations, and let's go on to the next priority. And the town board would hopefully encourage us to keep doing that. But from my perspective, if we're going to be effective, I think we really should try to focus up on a particular segment that A, we're passionate about, B, that there's a need for, and C, that the town and its partners, as Karen was hinting at, I think, from a regional perspective, that the town and its partners have ability to move the needle on, because we can be passionate about something and really have no influence, and so talking about it or strategizing about it becomes less effective. So as I was thinking through this with Sarah and Karen and kind of watching the emails go back and forth, I started to focus on a couple of questions, and that is, how are we going to define affordable housing? And Karen's 100% right. That definition probably varies across everyone's mind on this call. So I've got a little exercise that I think can help us get to what is the affordable housing that we want to focus on, or that we think we're able to impact in this effort. And so that's the prioritization exercise that I'm hoping we'll get to today. And then once we have that focus area, or those focus areas that we want to make impact in, I always start, in college they called it plagiarism, but I always start from a position of, who else has done this? What can we replicate and be really successful? Go out and find the models that already exist. And there are certainly models around the world and around the country. And I bet you won't be surprised to find that I think there are some models right here in our backyard. Karen mentioned the Solar Factory and others that are in play today. And there are folks on this call like Nash and Pastone who are doing this every day. And so we can talk through what those approaches are. Once we identify the approaches and the case studies that make the most sense for us, things we'd like to try to replicate, it would be a good time to talk to developers in the community and say, hey, it makes sense to us that this should be developed here in Canandaigua. What's keeping you from developing this? My understanding of economics is typically, if the market is ripe, if there's a market to be had, if the supply or if the demand is there, the supply will come. Why isn't that supply here? Why aren't we seeing that development in our community? It's typically best to go right to the well on this, go right to the people who are doing this, the people who are building in Canandaigua, and ask them why they're not focusing on this sector in the community. And the people who are building elsewhere, ask them why they're not focusing on Canandaigua, and start to understand what those barriers are. And then I think that'll help us identify some specific strategies that we can go to the town board with and just say, hey, we've done all this research and we think you, town board, and your partners are able to move the needle. So if we broke it out in that way, it can be a 4 to 6 month exercise for us. And so what I was hoping to get to today is that definition around affordable housing, and less about what's the Webster's definition or what's the US HUD definition. More, what is the definition within the confines of our committee? How are we defining affordable housing, and what areas are we going to focus on? The next session would be identifying those case studies that most closely align with our section, with our market segments, our priority market segments. Seeing if we can find a developer or two who are doing this work either in the region or close by, and have them come in and speak with us about the work they're doing and why or why not they're doing it, why aren't they doing it in Canandaigua. Following that, again, hear from developers on what the barriers are, and then on down the road, crafting some strategies for the town. And I think, to Karen's point, I think we're going to find that this is bigger than us. So this is a framework that I use when I'm helping folks think about housing affordability. It really is on a spectrum, and I talked through this with the CIC. So if you're a CIC member, you saw a really crappy pen drawing of this on the back of a notebook that I had with me at one of your meetings. So we've come a long way in the last year. in terms of our ability to be a little bit more graphic with it. But this gets right at Karen's point. There's a long way between a wholly subsidized unit. Here in Geneva, for example, we have the Geneva Housing Authority, who owns several what you would think of in your mind as a housing project, right? A densely developed multifamily housing complex where the vast majority of residents there pay very, very little, all the way up to market rate. There's a lot of ground to cover between wholly subsidized and market rate. And I use this dotted line here on the arrow to say, I've called out four pieces here. My bet is you've had experiences that'll fill in between each of these. Some of you, if Pathstone or Habitat, you're probably going to say, I'm actually working somewhere in the middle of some of these, and I've got other examples or other ideas. And this was just really to say, hey, here's a couple of exits on the throughway in terms of housing affordability. So on the left side of the exhibit, this wholly subsidized piece, that's what I was just describing. They do come in the form of very traditional housing projects. HUD, who typically, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, who typically funds these either themselves directly or through a state agency. In New York, that would be the Office of Community Renewal. Those folks are actually getting away from those really dense, concentrated housing developments, and they're moving into scattered site development. They just find that in a lot of cases, that's a more healthy environment, rather than concentrating poverty to scatter it. And so now HUD is moving into, and their subsidiaries like the housing authorities are moving into to scattered site development, which is to say maybe a couple of townhomes or maybe a couple of small houses on a street of market rate apartments. But either way, in these examples, and what I'm calling wholly subsidized, although I think the housing authority would argue with me about that, these wholly subsidized models are typically owned by a subsidiary, and I shouldn't say a subsidiary, a recipient of federal funds, owned by HUD, owned by a local housing authority, and managed by those folks. So the town's role is pretty limited, to the degree that there were folks on this call who said, we need that. That's the area that I want to focus on from a housing affordability conversation. If that's the area, really the only opportunities for the town to participate, short of creating its own housing authority and spinning that up and starting to develop housing, would be for advocacy. You certainly could go, Ontario County actually contracts with the Geneva Housing Authority to do county-wide housing services. So you could go to the county administrator and sit with the executive director of the housing authority and say, hey, we want to take Courtyard Apartments in Geneva and replicate it in the town of Canandaigua. They would listen, they would take the meeting, they probably would fall over backwards and be very excited because there's not a lot of communities out there who are looking for that. But aside from advocacy, really making sure your zoning is in order, making sure your development regulations would permit such a densified development, or even in the scattered site case, cluster type development. That's how the town would affect that. As we move up the chain, though, there are programs that subsidize owners. And so the most popular programming that subsidize facility owners, and this is the case where I say owner here, what I really mean is landlord, for lack of a better word. Owner subsidies are situations where the most popular program is a low-income housing tax credit project. And we've actually seen at least one of these that I've been familiar with in the town since I've been working with the town. One of these developments where they went to the state and said, we're going to commit to housing some definition of poverty, and the state always ties that back to median area income. So we're going to commit to housing folks who make less than 50% of median area income, median household income. And in exchange for that, we're going to get income tax credits that then we can use to offset the cost of our development. And so These are almost always multifamily housing, almost always multi-building multifamily developments. So again, a very intense clustered development, and they're typically financed through housing tax credits. The town role here would be very similar, advocacy. In this case, the federal government asks the town to stand up and say, yep, we're interested. We'd like to, we'll pass a resolution saying we support these tax credits. It's not a requirement, but it goes a long way in getting your tax credit application approved. So you could advocate in that way. You have to make sure your zoning is on point. No one, even the federal government, no one can wander into your town and just start building. So got to make sure your zoning is good, got to make sure your development regulations are good. But in this case, the town can also be an applicant for grant funds to support development of these projects. Doug, I always mess up the name, but I want to say it's Creekview. Is that the facility I'm thinking of?
Correct. Yes.
So Creekview was developed in this way. They had a private investor who leveraged low-income housing tax credits to finance that project. And so if you're thinking about Creekview, this is a way you can plug in if you want to see more of that. Occupant subsidy is, you've all probably at least heard the words Section 8 voucher. The county runs a program as well. The Department of Social Services runs a rent voucher program. And this is a case where each month a family is given some rent support. Section 8 is a federal program that's run through the county. And in this case, the county contracts to the Geneva Housing Authority. So Section 8 vouchers are federally funded rent vouchers where some portion of the rent is credited to the occupant. And then the occupant goes landlord to landlord and says, hey, I've got a Section 8 voucher that's worth this much money. And the landlord can accept it or they don't have to. DSS rent vouchers work very similarly, except they're administered by the county, by the Department of Social Services. Not a lot for the town to do here. Again, though, the county struggles. I know particularly Ontario County DSS struggles with finding places that that renters can occupy at the rate that DSS rent vouchers can offer. And so in this case, when I say advocacy, certainly going and sitting with the DSS commissioner or the county administrator and saying, hey, we want to make sure that we are getting our share of Section 8 vouchers in the town of Canandaigua. Again, they're going to jump for joy because it's not something that that a lot of communities in Ontario County, for example, and this is a little bit dated, but about 85% in 2018, about 85% of the DSS vouchers in Ontario County were split between the city of Geneva and the city of Canandaigua. 15% for the rest of the Ontario County geography. And that's simply because the rents are lower in those two jurisdictions. So if you want more DSS stuff, you have to find a way to incentivize development to get the cost of the unit down to a place where Section 8 and DSS vouchers would be valuable. And then the last stop on my expressway here are targeted populations. And this is the area when I'm working with communities on affordable housing, these are the areas that folks are most often talking about when they're talking about affordable housing. The big lament, certainly in the cities, in the more urban areas of the Finger Lakes, the big lament is we're losing seniors. Now, in a big chunk of cases, we're losing seniors to Florida. And if you ask Governor Cuomo, it's because of the weather. If you ask others, it's because there are other reasons. But one thing is for sure, most of the seniors I talked to who moved out of the cities moved out because of product. They're looking for low maintenance, no maintenance, single floor living, and with access to amenities, right? Whether that's access to on-site amenities, a gym or whatever, or access to regional amenities like a downtown that they can walk and enjoy, a lakefront that they can spend time on. So anyway, senior housing is one chunk of that. Workforce housing is a chunk of that, and that's to Karen's point. You know, if we were going to look at workforce housing, we would say all right, let's look at the top 10 employers in the town of Canandaigua and start to get down to wage rates. What are the wage rates in those top 10 employers? What could the average worker in Canandaigua afford? And then we would, that sets a price point, and we'd start to work, start to work with developers on that. So that's advocacy in a different way. We're going to advocate with the development community. We can certainly get into zoning and development regulations conversations across the spectrum here. What I will tell you that without fail, it's just like one of Newton's laws of affordable housing here is density equals affordability. That just is a foundational element. And so when we talk about advocacy here, we're talking about going out to developers and saying, we're willing to bend on, or we're willing to point you to the areas of the community where we feel zoning makes sense for more dense development. Our development regulations are streamlined. Believe it or not, and my Zoom screen is here, is covering this. But if I didn't write grants here, then I should have, because you would be very surprised at a program like Community Development Block Grant Funding. Community Development Block Grant Funding is again based on that area median income. The area median income for the Rochester metro area, which is what the town of Canandaigua would be judged by, is at a point where, again, when I studied this in the Rochester metro in 2018, a single teacher would have been CDBG eligible. So if we were going to develop a housing development that was targeted at the school district, for example, retaining teachers or having teachers in the Canandaigua School District live in the town of Canandaigua, and at that time anyway, a single teacher, a one-person household at the teacher's pay at that time would have been. So I only say that to say, to Karen's point about line workers at Pactiv or any of these kind of entry-level professional jobs, you're going to be able to retain those folks using some grant programs like CDBG. Comes with its hangups, but anyway. That was a lot. That was a very dense presentation. A lot of information there. We tried to organize it to make a little bit of sense. So from your perspective, first of all, I should ask, are there any questions about this slide? Do people need some clarification or want some deeper information on any of that?
So Matt, I want to jump in. This is Jared Simpson. I'm on the town board. I also teach in Canandaigua, and I've got kids coming in on Zoom in about 10 minutes. I just wanted to jump in and throw some thoughts. My personal opinion, and I've talked to a lot of people in the community, a lot of people in the school district, this targeted population, we need to focus on, and I know I said it last time, we need to focus on the affordable home ownership and finding those developers. I'm already reaching out to a few others that I know to see what is preventing them from coming here and building, focusing on affordable homes. I know that you talk to some and they say the seniors are buying the houses for $400,000 and they want the townhomes that are low maintenance. But if you talk to people on the other side of the spectrum, it's families with 1 or 2 kids who are coming in and don't want to live in an apartment, want that home. So we need to focus on that. And even talking about, our school population is declining, but the population that is staying is taking more and more of the resources. A smaller percent there's a growing population that is taking more and more of the resources and the time of the school district, which makes it which is making it more and more difficult. So to bring in bring in families, bring in people who want to settle here and lay down roots and have that home ownership is extremely important. So that's just my 2 cents. So I support, and that would fit in that targeted population. How can we get those groups here?
And Jared, that fits in with some of the research I've done reading. It showed that you're more likely to be able to accomplish something that we're looking to accomplish by designing neighborhoods
Mhm.
rather than individual housing units, but designing neighborhoods that focus on the buildings in the neighborhoods and creating something that is affordable at many levels. Not only affordable, but livable and enjoyable. So
Yes.
it's developing a community that's accepting of all different levels of affordability, and Matt addressed that in every one of these areas that he has on that spreadsheet addresses zoning and development regulation, and those are the two key issues in in establishing a neighborhood that's accepting of all levels of affordability.
Yeah, and I think we have some areas that we can target, you know,
Yeah.
in the uptown area to try that. I mean, I was speaking with an administrator the other day, and we were looking out at Fort Hill. You know, those smaller homes up along Fort Hill. You know, the lots are small, easier to take care of. You know, things like something like that. Finding somebody in the resources and creating, you know, like the Fort Hill community was created in the 50s in that whole area, doing something like that for those smaller 1,200 square foot, 1,200 square foot homes, 1,000 square foot homes to go in and have that.
And,
They're
and
nice, livable, enjoyable, affordable, maintainable, and is
And I
important.
agree with you that the uptown area is a really legitimate area to start addressing this issue. It is yet to be developed in what is envisioned, and it has the capability of being affordable for all different levels. Back to you, Matt.
No, that's great. Any other questions on the matrix, or anybody want to poke some holes here? Even that's completely acceptable.
Matt, I'm not able to pull up the screen for all your notes. I'm assuming that it will be on the YouTube.
Yes, sir. Should be, and I'm happy to email a PDF copy of the whole presentation to everyone. Just
Oh, that'd be great. That would be great.
Wonderful. Please.
The only comment that I have, based on some experience, is getting back to the Section 8 federal program. On the landlord side of things, I've done that a few times, not with a whole lot of success. Primarily because of issues that happen with the property, it gets beat up, that type of thing. I just wanted to put that comment in there.
I'm interested too. I mean, I read Jared 100% and agree with some of the comments around affordable home ownership. I mean, it's the unfortunate thing that's happening at this period in our history is that there are the next crop of would-be homeowners. Typically, what you see is that as each generation comes of age, you see their burst of home ownership, and they run out there and grab it. But that's just not happening with these current. I hesitate to even say millennials. I think we may be a little bit beyond that, beyond millennials. But those folks are fewer and fewer looking for it. But I still agree that is often an indicator, most often an indicator of community health. There's still a ton, particularly in what I would consider. I mean, I know Canandaigua is not what you would typically consider a rural area, but what I would consider it a bit exurban, at least a little bit outside of suburban Rochester. And in those areas, that dream is still alive. There's still there's still a big chunk of millennials who are looking to buy homes. And interestingly, particularly as you get to just inside of bankable, well, I'll call it bankable. We always say we never want to put anybody in an unbankable situation. That's not fair to them. It's not fair to the market. And so for the people who are bankable, who can, with whatever support is out there, whether it's a loan guarantee or other support, can get a loan. I was interested in both Pastone and Habitat's experiences with homeowner education, homeowner preparation, taking this crop of would-be buyers, and as we're starting to develop the product, making sure that we've got a pipeline of buyers who are ready to own. What do you think about that?
Hi, this is Sarah. Sorry, I couldn't change my name. Sarah Simpson. I'm with the Canandaigua office, and I cover Ontario County, Wayne, parts of Livingston. And I have a whole chunk of clients that would be jumping on properties right now. There's just so much competition and just nothing out there. So it's been a rough couple years, and the pandemic has only kind of magnified that need, and more people I feel are almost like under desperation right now to purchase. But in the meantime, they need somewhere affordable so that they can save, so that they can have a place in the interim while they are getting ready for homeownership, that is affordable for them right now and that can continue to help them towards homeownership. And it's just, I just feel like people right now are just desperate and almost like panicked to purchase right now. So it just is a very stressful market, and there's just nothing out there. We do repair and rehab as well through Pathstone, through one of my colleagues, and we're pushing out projects maybe like 3 months plus, because there's not contractors or materials and things like that on back order. So even if we can, get things up and running, it's going to be a little while. So I think some of the advocacy pieces that you mentioned for the town role, I really appreciated that, because if we can do some things in the shorter term, would be very helpful. One of the things you mentioned was that most of those Section 8 DSS is within City of Geneva and Canandaigua. 15% is outside of that area. And that definitely, I feel, reflects that if they're lower income, they require DSS Section 8 services. They require services close by, bus lines, access to things. So yeah, that's going to be in the cities. So we really have to think about where we're putting any of these planned neighborhoods, which I love too, or any other developments, that we really, really think about access, transportation, and services that are close by that they would need. Because clearly from the numbers that you mentioned, that's a big part of utilizing those services.
Yeah, it's a great point on two fronts. I think, I love the idea of finding housing or developing housing that is the pre-buyer housing, right? That's like the pipeline housing opportunity. These are people who are saving, they're getting ready. And if that product doesn't exist in Canandaigua, they're going to go to a less expensive market, and then they're going to buy somewhere else, right? They're going to look away from the city of Canandaigua because they're going to be exposed to this other market. So the idea of trying to create almost these little pipeline, moderately priced rental opportunities is interesting. And then the other thing that you hit on is this current labor materials crisis that we're in. And we should take care. I'm knocking on as much wood as I can find, and very expensive now wood that's in my office. And in saying that, my hope is that that's a bubble that's going to shake out here in the next couple of years. And so, we're here to be strategic, right? And so our hope, and as we talk to developers, we want to give due time to the current crisis, but we want to make sure that we don't let that govern the long range strategy, because it's got to equal out, right? It's got to deflate at some point. But for right now, that's what's happening. The biggest pinch right now a huge pinch right now on affordability is this labor and materials crisis.
All right, I'm backed up about a year on some things.
Gotta be. Most people, yeah, absolutely. I mean, simple jobs, decks, bathroom remodels, those kinds of things are 6-8 months out on schedules. I also just said simple, like I could do it, which I can't. so it's simple to a really skilled contractor.
Hey, I'll come build you an $18,000 deck because that's about what your base price is gonna be right now. So I've got to jump off, but I do, again, kind of going on what Sarah was saying, this whole, I still think, and maybe it's my naivete about it, it's the whole, the chicken and egg type of thing. I mean, are people not buying here or wanting to buy because they're not available, or are they not available because they're not buying them? I think it's a combination of the two, to try to create a product, and people who will create a product to bring people here, because there are people going places to buy home. If you jump over to Phelps, or if you jump over to Bloomfield or other places, you can probably get into a house a little bit cheaper than you could around here. So they are out there. So that's all I've got. I've got to go teach about the Cold War. So enjoy the
right, man. I wish I was going to that class.
And and I will let me know, Sarah, let me know if you have any assignments for me. So, all right, thanks guys.
Thanks, Jared.
Thanks,
Jared.
I just want to say, well, first of all, thanks to Karen and Matt for hosting this forum. I think it's great. It also has brought out things that we do have in place that we can work with. We've got a comprehensive plan that hopefully will be approved soon. We've got our uptown development plans. You'd mentioned zoning, we're looking at that. I think there's a lot in there to start to form the baseline for us to get going on some of this. The question that keeps coming up in my mind is like, what side of the coin do we look at? Do we look at the developer side? Do we look at the person that's looking for housing? Where is it both? Is that where we put our efforts? I don't know.
Andy, in your work with builders, developers who are looking at particularly these large swath developments, do they have a pretty ready understanding of the market dynamics? I mean, do they? Is there any sense that we should be packaging market data and putting it in front of developers and saying, listen, if you developed $150,000 to $200,000 homes, or $125,000 to $175,000 homes, they're going to sell in an afternoon. The developers already know that, and they just know there's more money to be made on the far side of that, or could we market a little bit to them?
I think from the conversations that I'm having and had, most of the developers would prefer to build the $300,000-$400,000 homes because their margin is going to be that much more money. They're going to make a lot more money building those type of homes. And if you take a look at the construction cost right now, I think it would be hard pressed to build 1,000 square foot home for $175,000 actually. So I think that's the other challenge. But to answer the other question, there are developers out there, one that I know well and work with a lot, that understands there is this need and is trying to figure out a way to fulfill this need in the town. So I think they're aware of it.
Yeah. Okay.
But Andy, doesn't a lot of that depend upon density and density in addition to square foot size of the home and lot size? I think all three of those issues can create more affordability and help the margins. You're correct. Developers are looking for margins, but there's got to be, there's got to be give and take in the development world. They're going to build these I come from a company, and let me tell you, I spent 24 years saying I wanted people to pay cash for their house, and I want it to always be over $1 million. However,
that's the same thought process I have actually, but it doesn't work that way.
I know, but I do know that we looked at the tiny homes issue that started maybe 10, 15 years back. And we actually tried to use some of the techniques they were using in the homes we were building to create something that was more affordable in the very strategic area that we worked in.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Karen, you're right. I mean, density is a big thing. I mean, it goes without saying, if you could build one home on an acre and make, I'm just making up numbers, you could build one $400,000 home on an acre, and the builder developer can make, I don't know, $50,000. I'm just, again, making up numbers. And if they can build 3 affordable homes, and they make $15,000 a piece or $20,000 a piece, they can make the same profit or more on the same acre of land, right? So to your point, exactly.
Just a quick question. Has Ontario County or Town of Canandaigua at all, have we ever received CDBG funding previously, or I don't know if anybody knows that?
So the challenge with just general CDBG in the town of Canandaigua is if you look at the town as a whole, the income levels are high, right? And so it'd have to be a real focused project. And so we're exploring that now, actually, on at least one project. But for example, I think Doug, did Pactiv get a CDBG economic development grant?
Yeah, we've done multiple CDBG grants, but to Matt's point, they have to be laser focused because the income qualifications, basically our income level is too high when you're looking at the entire town.
Okay.
Actually, Pactiv just completed a CDBG program through the Ontario County Economic Development Board.
We were also able to, we've done it for economic development, CDBG. We've also done it for Acustos and Pactiv both, where the town itself was the applicant. And we've also, you know, we were looking at Cheshire, and specifically we had done an income survey. And so it qualified for the Hamlet of Cheshire would actually qualify for CDBG funds based on the income level. But at the end, you know, we weren't able to pull that project together. That was for infrastructure, sewer, specifically infrastructure. We weren't able to pull that together because the cost was still at a level that outpriced what the average resident in the community could basically afford. So there's definitely challenges when you're talking about this issue, multiple factors pulling at the piece of the pie.
And I think we got a lot of tools, you know, at our disposal too. I mean, and one of the tricks or tough parts about strategic planning is we get right to solution. We're very solutions oriented people, everyone on the call, and so we get to move right into solutions. And my mind was spinning, like, what I want to find out from Andy, what portion of that development cost is land, and can we get the land cost down using the LDC to cheat down land cost? If we could get an extra, you know, if we could use something like incentive zoning. The town has a great PUD ordinance that they use regularly with the town's PUD ordinance. You can take virtually anything into the town board and say, hey, take a look at this. We think this makes sense. Could we leverage either the PUD ordinance or some incentive zoning to say, hey, yeah, we'll get you an extra lot or two of $450,000 homes, but we want you to take this adjacent lot and build $160,000 homes. And that way the developer is able to make a little money on the $160,000 homes, but also have a big cash grab on some additional density for market rate housing.
Well, to Matt's point, and also Karen, Andy and I have been having some conversations with a developer about the Uptown area. And I think that is the area where we have the greatest flexibility for looking at a variety of different housing options in the build out of that area. And specifically, you know, one of the things that we talked about is exactly what Matt just said. Andy and I sat in a conference room with these gentlemen, and I said, you design what works for you so that it's an affordable project, and specifically affordable housing, and bring it back and let's see what we can do. And so hopefully that's able to move forward, but that's our Uptown area gives us that flexibility that we don't have a lot of the other areas of the town.
Yeah, and to Sarah's point earlier, Uptown is close to services. It's close to the city, so it starts to make a lot of sense. I don't want to stymie this conversation, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. It sounds to me like, and I hate paraphrasing, 'cause I don't want to cheat anybody's opinion here, but it sounds to me like a big focus area of this committee, or a big interest area of this committee, is finding a way to create affordable ownership opportunities specifically for workforce retention. And then possibly a secondary opportunity is definitely a secondary opportunity is ensuring that we have enough affordable units in that same market segment to build us enough time to build additional units, right? To build additional ownership units. Does that sound like the answer to bullet one here? Does anybody take issue with that assessment?
I'll just comment on that, Matt, and I think Karen or somebody mentioned it earlier. Actually, I think it was the gal from Pathstone. So when you take these younger folks, it doesn't have to be younger folks, but folks that are attempting to buy the $175,000 to $200,000 homes today, which unbelievably is probably affordable, but and they're living in an apartment that they're paying $1,500 or $1,800 a month for. They're not able to save any money, so it's a hamster wheel, right? They just keep running and running and running, and then couple that with the shortage of inventory that we have. So I have one particular young couple that has made 5 or 6 offers on homes. They're and they qualify up to $205,000. So they're looking at homes that are priced at 175-ish, and they're being outbid. People are buying these homes for 215, 20, 230. So that's really right now the biggest issue that we're faced with, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And so back to another tool, or another opportunity, I think, for the LDC or Pathstone or Habitat or any of these folks to be a part of. You almost have to curate the pipeline, right? We're going to build this development for this population. We're going to prep this pool of potential owners for these specific, and like marrying these deals from conception, right? Not leaving it to chance in the market. If you leave it to chance in the market, then the $175,000 home you just built immediately becomes a $250,000 home, just by the sheer market force of it. And I don't know how. I mean, I do know how you do that, but it jumps too quickly to solutions, and I'd rather just explore problems. That's a great problem you've identified, Andy.
So I just want to maybe jump in, because I know we're talking about development, new housing, finding any new housing, like building of like between the 125 and 175 is nearly kind of undoable right now. What about potential for like major rehab programs, like the home aspect of CDBG? Just because Pathstone, we do partner a lot with like in Monroe County, the home program, where they take a property, rehab it totally. The client can walk in and have it turnkey. So we can turn some properties that need help into nice neighborhood properties. So I just don't know if that's a possibility or something to think about as an alternative to brand new building.
And I think this gets to Karen's point, about regionalism. I think that opportunity absolutely exists, and I've seen amazing models where an organization like Pathstone marries with an organization like Habitat, marries with the local jurisdiction, in this case, the town or the city, and says, we're going to acquire these 4 houses that are kind of leaning to this side, and Habitat's going to deploy its forces. Pathstone's going to create some financing opportunities. The community is going to rally around and get the buildings up to shape. And then these 4 houses become real Habitat success stories, right? CDBG steps in and funds, whatever streetscape or public improvements need to happen there. That can happen. The challenge is, of course, the opportunity is going to most likely be, and I hate to overgeneralize, but it's going to most likely be in the city, right? That's where the density of current housing is, right? Town housing, in large part, is relatively new when compared to the city. And so the opportunities, although I'm sure the code enforcement folks in the town could probably point us right to a couple of houses they'd love to see turned over to more responsible ownership. So I agree. I think that is an absolute opportunity. We should be really looking at every opportunity for inventory. The most ecologically, environmentally sound way to do this is rehab. The most cost-effective way to do this is rehab in most cases, and it's time efficient, right? So that's a great point. So I think that one opportunity here for market, and this will start to bleed. I'm the world's most uncomfortable salesperson, just so you know, but this will start to bleed a little bit into maybe how MRB Group can be supportive of the effort generally. But you know, as we're getting to a piece of the market that I think makes sense, we're throwing a lot of darts out at numbers, right? Andy made me smile when he said, you know, 175 to 200 is affordable. I think that's almost double the mortgage that I have right now, and of course I'm 2 towns over, so it's not a good comparison. But regardless, 175 to us sounds reasonable and sounds subprime market right now. But it doesn't mean a thing until we know what workforce means, right?
I'll let you know right now that's out of
yeah.
that's out of range for my
Out of range, right? So
yeah.
So a valuable piece of information to this third bullet point here is what's the average rate, not the Rochester AMI. That's also virtually valueless to us at this point. But if we're really trying to retain active line employees and teachers in the school district and county employees and you know, these early career stage professionals or recent retirees or wherever.
Also service industry employees, which are very relevant in this area, which is a tourist area and relies heavily on the service industry. So those are key areas.
Yeah, you bet, 100%. And we don't want to become Key West or Hilton Head, where I know in Hilton Head, you take a bus. If you're an employee of a hotel, you ride the bus in from Beaufort every day for an hour and 15 minutes to get to work, and then an hour and 15 minutes at the end of the day, which is a lot of fun after you've just spent 9 hours serving people, right? So good point, great point. We should be able to get this relatively simply, but we should be able to get a picture of average wages in the Canandaigua market, what those average wages are for full-time employees, and say, all right, here's the average wage. Somebody hit the HUD number the other day is, you know, roughly 33% of gross income is what you should be spending on housing, and that's inclusive of a couple of different things, but it gets us near a mortgage number, which gets us near a purchase price number. And I think to Sarah's point, that number is not going to be $175,000. It's going to be something a little south of that. But anyway, what we'll need to know here when we talk to developers is what is the price point? Because at 175, we're most likely just pandering to the low end of market rate, right? And I'm not saying pandering in a cruddy way, even though I don't think there's another way to take pandering, but we're most likely catering, I should say, to the low end of what we would call market rate. I think we're going to have to get south of that to make a meaningful impact on affordable housing issues in Canandaigua. But the data will help us understand that. And then we hit on Karen put together a really great list of other voices at the table. So anybody here who has a developer friend who's building near the south end of the market, it won't be helpful to us to to talk to someone who's strictly building in the $500,000 range. But so if we're able to talk to people, someone who jumps to mind as someone who does this kind of regularly is a guy like Chris Iverson, who's close by. You know, he's in Gorham. Ryan Wallace, who Karen mentioned, is in Geneva, but he's doing it in a couple of different places, exploring models in a couple of different places. Chris is a more actually Chris is all over the board, but his meat and potatoes is a pretty standard street of 1,000 square foot ranch on slab houses, whereas Ryan will get into a more of a niche market of he's exploring the tiny house concepts and communal living, which isn't quite as hippie-ish as it sounds.
However, it would be an interesting type to put into the uptown area, because
yeah, absolutely.
it is a focused community type living, and
Right.
Evidently he just finished a project or is working on a project in Farmington.
Yeah, that community concept is we're able to get the homes down to below 1,000 square feet because
Right.
we're willing to share. He creates an eat-in kitchen that's good for 2 people, and then he creates a clubhouse where if you're going to have your family over for dinner, you rent the dining room in the clubhouse, right?
And
And by the
honestly,
time you
I'll
take
say,
that tiny house cost and the clubhouse cost and put them together, they're still below market. They can be.
and a lot of my clients, like the younger ones that are having trouble finding their first time home, they are looking for these creative ideas because the standard, home on the market is not out there right now for them. So I have clients that are like, yeah, find me a tiny home and put it on a tract of land. I'm happy. Like, get a manufactured property on a foundation. But the land prices are also up there. But like getting creative like this, I think is, fair game for clients right now, because they're looking at the traditional market and going like, I can't even step a foot in there.
Right. There's no point in even looking at
I
it.
devil's advocate there a little bit. What we tend to see in the families that we serve is, families with 3, 4, sometimes 5 kids, where, a 3-bedroom house may be inadequate from a bedroom standpoint. So I think it is definitely the spectrum in terms of what is needed out there. And
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to explore every piece of that, right? I mean, what makes the most sense? And I know my experience with Habitat is the same. Building a 2-bedroom home is good and serves a certain segment of the market. Where Habitat, in my experience, has moved on to that rehab conversation is where they do need to get to a 3, 4, 5-bedroom home. Sometimes rehab makes sense, but yes, to your point, our focus can be narrow from a market perspective, but we probably need to be open to as many different models as can serve as a bunch of different folks. So,
To get back to Habitat and Pathstone type organizations, a big part of this challenge is education. And it's not just education, individual people who come to you for help, but it's educating the industry in the area, the places where wage earners first look for help. And I know that because when I was working, they would come to me, and my place of choice was Pathstone. And believe it or not, 3 people actually took my suggestion in 24 years. But the point is, education in the PACTIVs and the VA hospital, the other organizations that offer help in figuring out how you're going to get from living where you don't want to live to living in something that you can afford. It might take a little help, but it gives them an idea of what is available to help. And it gives them an idea of how to take care of the place that they want. And it gives them an idea of how to get the help they need to make it the place that they want. So.
Yeah, and I was back to that pipeline conversation or that buyer ecosystem. One of the areas that I've had a lot of success with, at least in trying to get to the answer, is workforce surveys. So I go to the major employers and ask the question, do you live in Canandaigua? If so, why? If not, why not? Do you own a home? If so, or if not, why not? I had this big dream that I was going to build affordable housing for all my police officers and teachers. And at the time, the conversation I had with the cops and after we did the surveying, the cops and the teachers, you can give me a house. I don't want to live where want to live where I serve, for a variety of reasons. The teachers wanted to be able to go to Wegmans in Canandaigua so that they wouldn't run into parents in the produce aisle in Geneva. And that's like a cultural thing that we can't get over. But, you know, for example, putting a closing cost buy down to attract teachers might be the right answer, or it might not. So getting that data that Karen's talking about, talking to HR folks in these offices and saying, you know, why are your people living here, or why aren't they? And once we get to that answer, making sure we market it through those offices, right? Making sure that the HR folks know Canandaigua has a closing cost match program, or whatever the strategy is that comes out of it. Great point.
Matt, you need to present your proposal from MRB.
Oh,
so
sure. So
people can touch with it.
happy to do that, because we are getting to the end of folks' time, I know. So I spoke with Doug and Sarah a while back just about me being all in anyway. This is just a project that I love. But with me, you just get me and a lot of great stories about the experiences I've had in Geneva and other places, and I'm happy to continue telling you stories and holding you hostage. But if we were to engage MRB Group, we have a market analysis team, an economic development and market analysis team, who does this work for a living and who does it really well, has access to a lot of information that we otherwise would have to scrape around for. And so what I suggested to Doug and to Sarah is that if MRB Group can be supportive, one way for us to do it is to offer up our services in what I call hourly on-demand way. And that is, I've listed out some here, but really any question that I can't answer, if I can answer, I'm just going to answer it, and we don't have to worry about it. But if it would be valuable to engage our market analysts on any of these types of items, where are there other successful affordable housing models? What are the best practices around the US in terms of developing housing in an affordable way? What does the Canandaigua market look like? What are our opportunities? Where is that sweet spot in the market for the town of Canandaigua? And then what's out there? How competitive would we be for a CDBG or another funding source to support the effort? And so there's a price on here. That $10,000 price was just, hey, let's just throw a number at it. In reality, what it would be is not $10,000, but up to $10,000 in support, so that we have a meeting and you say, man, it would be helpful for us to have this information. Matt, can you go get that? And I turn to my team, they get it, and the town gets a bill. So I don't want to speak for the town. I think Doug is still on, and Sarah Reynolds is on. But my understanding is that the town board is looking for a recommendation from this committee as to whether or not it would be valuable to have MRB support in that way.
Yeah, if I could just jump in there. So, we started this project team, and it was, it's great, and there's a lot of energy and excitement, but I could see coming a mile away that there's going to be points and times where you're going to need some professional assistance, as Matt has just suggested. And there is no budget line for this project team. There's currently no money available. So went to the town board to say, hey, is this something that you want to support? Do you want to offer some assistance to this project team? It would need to be a budget modification. And their response was, well, does the project team feel like they need it? So that's where we need some guidance from you guys. Is this something you want to request? In which point we'll put a resolution before the town board and see what the vote is. But just want to have a conversation about it.
I definitely say yes.
Yeah, if we're serious, we've got to throw some money at getting some expertise.
Yeah, I third that. I think, there's some really tough questions here that we need to drill down on, and without some expertise and some investment in paying for those expertise, I don't think we're going to really get to answer the solutions that we need. So I agree.
I would also support it because I think everybody on the committee is pretty busy doing other things. And this is something that needs to be moved along.
Right.
I'll say quickly. And I think this is a way that it could be pushed along a lot faster.
And I support it also, and because I see what is going on in the CIC, and I attended the Economic Development Committee meeting yesterday where they were working on form-based code and the uptown area, and now is the time. And some of these things, I don't believe we either don't have the expertise nor the time to do things like market analysis, assessment of opportunities, that piece in particular. And my understanding is, Matt, that this would be billed out at an hourly rate as this work is being done. Is that correct?
That's right. So if you need something, you let us know. We will put our folks on it, and then whatever that number is, if that's what it is.
And it looks to cover, like, to me, at least a 6-month period, maybe 8 months.
Sure. You bet.
Okay.
And
So
would-
I agree that we should send it on to the town board.
Would this data be available to the town or to the public, or would this just be proprietary?
So typically when we engage with the town, whatever we produce with public dollars is public domain. So it's something Doug has typically insisted on that, and I would certainly agree.
Yeah, and that would help any grant funding we could apply for the area as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Just another quick thought. I think this dovetails perfectly into the economic development initiatives and things like that too, because obviously the more people we have, they're invested in our community, they're going to use the services within our community, the businesses within our community, and this falls right in with really the big picture.
And I just have to say that most of you know I'm on the Ontario County Economic Development Board. Every single presentation that we get for bringing a new business or a new entity into Ontario County asks the question about affordable housing for their employees. So this is countywide. It's not just Canandaigua. However, if you survey the people in businesses in Victor, they might want to live in a place like Canandaigua. So it is countywide, and we need to open up our area to, like I say, people of all capabilities and all affordability, and because it's such a wonderful area to live.
One last,
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, one last question too. I know one of the concerns a few of us had was about engaging with community members and diverse populations, people of color. So I just want to make sure that that was a strong piece of the market research and analysis. But then also to the members here that we also make sure that we do some outreach and include.
To everybody here, you know what? Invite anybody you think would be interested in this to attend our meetings. I mean, these meetings are, right, Doug? These meetings are open to anybody.
Right.
And I encourage people, I really encourage people to advocate for what they need. And if they don't advocate, they don't always have someone to speak up for them. So you can speak up for them and advocate and tell them they need to advocate for themselves.
And to both of your points, so these meetings are all recorded, also including this meeting right now, and they're all available through our YouTube channel. And what I find often is I share a link to one of the meetings with a little post on social media and say, hey, if you want to be involved. So please feel free to do that. Let's help get the word out that we're talking about this and push out those links to these meetings, and hopefully it'll generate more interest in them.
Great, yeah, thanks.
I was just going to say, with regard to the proposal, I have what I need. We'll go ahead and do a resolution, put it on the town board agenda for June, saying that the project team supports moving this forward in terms of that. And we'll ask for a budget amendment to actually create a budget line for the affordable housing project team.
Sounds good.
I think, you know, in terms of I really appreciate it, by the way, and I appreciate everybody's being plugged into this effort, and again, your passion for it. You know, in terms of that next module, or that next work to be done in exploring best practices, what I would encourage you to do is reach out to Sarah or Karen or myself, or all of us actually, or reply all to the whole crew here with ideas about who we could bring to the table to talk about. If you stumbled across a neat approach in another community, or you know of a developer who is doing this work somewhere in Canandaigua or elsewhere, that we could invite to ask them some of these questions, how they got their project done, etc. I think that's what that next module is really about, is just understanding the approaches that are out there. And so if we could get some people who are actually doing it live in the room, that'd be awesome. With that, Karen, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, I don't think people are leaving anyway. I don't think we have any more business to discuss, but we're looking at meeting once a month, I believe, and we'll be in touch about what we have in store next time. And continue to invite people to this. It needs more advocacy. So thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Appreciate the
thanks,
time.
man.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.